Hi, guys. Doomberg is one of my very favorite people to interview. And today we talk about why problems at small banks may cause a credit crunch, which may cause a recession in the U.S. We also talk about how it's hard to be anti-nuclear and be a green person at the same time, green energy person, not just physically green. And we also talk about why Doomberg is a no-coiner and why he doesn't generally invest in public markets at all. All this and more in the video you're about to watch. I was going to say that I have a favorite green chicken in my life, but actually there's only one green chicken in my life, and that is Doomberg. And I don't mean that in an impure way. I am a huge Doomberg fan. I am a paying subscriber of Doomberg. He has, or they, I should say it's a team, have one of the largest individual investment newsletter subscriptions around. It's been an amazing business, and congratulations, by the way, Doomberg, on just over 1 year now of having paying customers, a subscriber business, I should say. It's a great product. You guys do fantastic research on a number of different verticals, not just a one-trick pony, and that's one of the things that impresses me the most.
Yeah, James, hey, great to be here. First of all, thanks for the invite back, and appreciate the kind words. It has been a year. We just crossed on April 6th when we opened the paywall, and then on May 1st is when we went sort of fully behind the paywall, and it's been a wild ride. As you said, we're the number one paid finance Substack in the world, actually, which is sort of strange to say.
Awesome. And in a year, right? Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. But it's been, the response from our customers, I guess we would call them, has been really amazing and humbling and life-altering, and you and I have discussed off-air in a variety of different venues, sort of how we did it and the joyride that this has been. And it really is, every day we wake up and we make a commitment to ourselves that we intend to savor this. You don't make it a life-altering investment in time and effort with the people that you care deeply about the most and achieve this level of success without there's some risk of sort of normalizing that and assuming that like more is always better. We wrote a piece on this in this regard, which is, the disease of more is something that many people succumb to after they achieve some success. And we're committed to not submitting ourselves to that, but to savor every day, to wake up feeling blessed, feeling enthused, to attack each day as the head football coach of the University of Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, would say, to attack each day with an enthusiasm unknown to humankind. And that's our objective with each day. And I intend to attack this podcast with the same enthusiasm.
We appreciate that very much. And I would just add, I would say it's more than some people move the goalpost. I would say 999, out of, or 9,999 out of 10,000. Almost everybody moves that goalpost. And the fact that you are disciplined really is a testament to the character you got. And by the way, you've also succeeded. And I can say this because I've been in the investment newsletter industry for a long time, and I know how the marketing is. You've succeeded without high pressure marketing at all. You just show up with good stuff and people like it and people buy it. So double congrats for that.
No, I appreciate that. And in fact, we've spent nothing on customer acquisition in the first year, which is pretty amazing. But a ton of sweat equity goes into this, James. Like there's a lot of people who just assume that sort of, quote, overnight success is some trick or some shortcut. There are no shortcuts. I mean, Vince Lombardi famously said, find out what the price is and pay it. And we pride ourselves on putting in the time, the effort, preparing for every podcast appearance, researching every piece, living and dying by every typo. Like you can't put out as much as we do without the occasional typo. Continuous improvement, doing everything we can, helping other people in the space, building a community of friends and colleagues and professionals in the content space, and really committing ourselves, our lives, our families to this effort. And it just goes to show, with a keyboard and a Bloomberg terminal, we were able to sort of carve out this amazing business. And again, truly grateful. And the disease of forgetting how, where we were at the bottom of COVID versus where we are today, and something that is very precious to us, something that we're taking the time to celebrate, but also not resting on our laurels. And every piece is our objective is every piece is our best piece. And if the latest piece that we've published isn't our best piece, then we have failed our subscribers, and that is a catastrophic no-no. So,
the fastest way to success is to go straight to the hard, slow way. In other words, and you've done that, and I applaud that. So let me get to. We're going to talk about recession risk, energy, and crypto today, and whatever branches from that. Let me go straight to my first question. intake through podcasts and through reading a bunch of Scott Galloway these days, and I don't agree with everything he says, but I do agree with one thing. He says that for the past, I don't know, year and a half or more, everybody's been talking about this recession that's just around the corner, but it's never really happened. And we've got data points in economics that look kind of really paint a case for both stories. It's really hard to read with tea leaves. What is your take on that, specifically connected to the banking crisis we've had with SVB, with Signature Bank, and the others?
Yeah, sure. So we wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago called Regional Fallout, and I should say, by way of disclosure, we live in flyover country. We live in a small town. We do all of our banking with a community bank, not even a regional bank, a local bank with, $1 billion in assets total, like sort of a classic small bank. And we have a person at that bank, and that person is the head of, private banking, and that person is our partner. That person is a partner in the creation of Doomberg as a business, and before we launched, she came over across town and sat in our office and listened to our business plan and physically, literally did her, know your customer anti-money laundering obligations, because she understood the timing and source and magnitude of the potential future cash flows that we might be experiencing as we prepared for launch. And
it'd be harder to do on Zoom, right? If you're a green chicken.
Well, no, it'd be hard to do at J.P. Morgan because we're small enough, and who cares, right? And so, that bank, well, credit union in this case, underwrites a lot of real estate loans in the community and backs a lot of small businesses. And really, when you think about it, regional and community banks are at the core of, well more than half of the U.S. GDP. And J.P. Morgan doesn't need to lend or even be aware, not that we had to borrow, but doesn't need to be aware of Doomberg to make money. They make money by being too big to fail. And so we're at this point in the economy where, because of the accelerated nature of the interest rate hikes that the Fed did, which, who could blame them? We have this inflation problem, which we believe traces back to energy, which I know we'll talk about in a bit. You have these regional and community banks for whom there is no sort of Fed put, so to speak, on deposits. And because of Janet Yellen's, terrible performance in Congress in front of Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma, every single small business in the country is pondering their treasury strategy. And prior to this recent little mini run on the banks, most people just assumed that their bank was sound, and sure, I'm well over the FDIC limits, but now everybody is looking to get a bank account at the Big Six, or more threateningly, we believe, to the small and community and regional banks, is this sweeping of excess funds above FDIC into money market funds or Treasury Direct, because the yields are just so much higher than these small banks can afford to pay. And these are chaotic systems, and Janet Yellen clearly was not thinking past first and second order consequences of their haphazard policy around the bailout of the depositors in Silicon Valley Bank. And so we are seeing a flight of deposits from such institutions, and these institutions literally don't lend when deposits are shrinking. And when small regional and community banks stop lending, the economy goes into a credit crunch. And so this is something that we're watching very carefully. This is, by the way, Jim Bianco put out a brilliant thread, which was an insight that we hadn't seen before, which is all of this is happening around tax day. And on tax day, there's a massive outflow in the sort of week before and week after people's taxes are due of cash from these small banks. And that actually impacts their lending. Like there's a hysteresis effect to the coincidence of everybody having to pay their taxes, deposits fleeing these small institutions, and then with a small lag, we see a credit contraction. And so if you mix that in right now with this recent mini run on the banks, now luckily the Feds drew a line in the sand. They've decided that they're going to prop up, First Republic and the other banks that were sort of locked in with Silvergate and Signature and Silicon Valley Bank. And so far, so good, knock on wood. It seems as though the peak of the panic has come and gone, and everyone's going back about their business. But it's really something worth keeping an eye on. So if there was one parameter that we would watch very, very carefully, to predict whether or not we would be heading into a true economic contraction. It would be deposit outflows from the non-too-big-to-fail banks. And that's something that we're watching very carefully.
Do you think, and if you don't have an opinion about this, is okay, but do you think, I mean, as much as I like community banks as well, and like you, I have a friend in Oklahoma who ran a medical company with a lot of branches, and they at one point they had a little trouble. They weren't quite going to make their loan covenants. They got the banker at, in a dinner, and my friend thought the banker was going to get all irate and sue them, but they were cool, and everything worked out okay in the end, and the company prospered. And you probably wouldn't have had that with Money Center, JP Morgan, kind of a bank. So they are good, and they started to serve a lot of the farming communities in the U.S. That's why we have so many bazillion banks compared to many other countries. That said, don't you think, or is an argument that banking is just a business of scale, and ultimately the evolution of that industry is going to be towards these big companies, and there's going to be some collateral damage? That's sad, but overall, the bigger banks can get better pricing?
Well, let's take that hypothesis to its logical conclusion. What that says is you'll only have mega corporations serving all of our needs. And therefore, you'll have less dynamic experimentation and really the essence of capitalism occurring in our economy. And you will end up with basically fascism, where you have 20 mega corporations controlling all aspects of our lives: food, banking, entertainment, news, pick your favorite, education, and no small upstart, no entrepreneur, no small business with a new idea will be able to get funding. And heaven forbid they do get a leg up, they'll be squashed because they will not be relevant to the half a dozen big banks that remain. And so I would view that as a particularly Orwellian outcome that should be opposed. We were in the piece Regional Fallout, we talked about one of the key aspects of the German economic miracle before they committed energy suicide was the vast network of really small community banks that led to these family-owned private businesses that became world-class in whatever it is they decided to do. And it's really an amazing story. It goes to show just how an economy like Germany could become a dominant player with a relatively small population, because it had this amazing combination of access to cheap energy before they impaled themselves, and really dynamic, small, local touch banking. And it is that second piece of the equation that many people don't appreciate. And look, if you're Jamie Dimon, that's what you want. You want an oligopoly. You want to own banking, where you become too big to fail, which they are, and then you kneecap all your competitors. This is why monopolistic behavior is considered anti-capitalist. We've lost this in the country, and our good friend Matt Stoller, who writes a newsletter Big on Substack, has been doing tireless work in this regard, trying to ring the alarm, or sound the alarm, I guess, on this important issue. Like allowing monopolies to grow and to prosper is the antithesis of capitalism. And there's a reason why we break up monopolies, and Standard Oil famously back at the turn of the century. Competition is good. Small is better. Small is dynamic. And I don't think we should just sleepwalk into an economy where 6 CEOs get to decide who's creditworthy and who isn't.
Yep, I mean that's fair, and I wouldn't want that. That's a very dystopian world to live in as well. So I'm with you totally on that. I guess I'd wonder if there's a happy medium somewhere. Right now, we were speaking moments before we recorded. The U.S. had 15,000 banks in the early 1980s. Now it's down to 4,000, which is still way, way more than most other countries. Japan, China. China's its own thing, but China, UK, Germany is the exception, as you brought up. I don't know if that's a feature or a bug, having so many small banks. And maybe the market's going to decide anyway, and it's up to regulators to stop banks from getting too big. I know they can grow organically above 10% of deposits. They can't grow by acquisition above 10% of deposits. Maybe that's enough to stop these big banks from getting bigger, or maybe not.
We would be unabashedly for policies that increase the number of banks. Full stop.
Increase from 4,000.
100%. Yeah, 12,000 banks would be too few for us. I mean, it just, the local touch is irreplaceable. And the role that a banker plays in capital formation which is critical to how a quote-unquote capitalistic society functions, is not outsourceable to an algorithm or a call center. Like, we have a person on speed dial that we can call anytime that we have an issue. Hey, we have a big wire coming in. Here's the source of it, and we're going to move it to these other accounts. You know, like when you deal with algorithmic know your customer AML type situations, we've had our events with our payment processor for Doomberg. And look, Stripe is great, and it's fantastic. And luckily for us, we're big enough that we have real people at the company that we can call. But these algorithms, you know, if we have a big renewal day, they might say, whoa, what's this big influx of cash coming in? We're going to put a hold on your account. And anybody who's used Stripe and is listening to this podcast can probably relate. Absent the ability to speak to a human, these types of interventions by computers can throw a serious wrench into the gears of your business. And, I are not ready to submit all of our lives to the whims of an algorithm. So I feel intuitively that smaller banks are better, more dynamic, more responsive, more knowledgeable of their local economies, can understand, like your friend's case, who is truly creditworthy, where an incident is not an opportunity to screw over the entrepreneur, but an opportunity to stand next to them at a moment of crisis and then to benefit from the lifelong relationship that flows from that. And if you remove that from our economy, I think we're headed down a very dangerous path.
Interesting point. And just to further that, I will say, as someone who used to do business with China, I had to move money back and forth, and big banks have big bureaucracies and big bureaucratic policies, and there were several nightmares or headaches that I really got stuck in that I don't know if a small bank could have helped more in that case or not. But you're just a number to a big bank, and you got to go to the website and do this, that, and the other, and it caused a lot of stress. So I think there's a bright side of it. Let me shift gears to energy. I guess your original area of expertise. You have long been a fan of nuclear power, which I am too, and I think a lot of the green community now is waking up to that, saying, "Hey, nuclear, we hated it a couple of years ago. Now we don't hate it so much anymore." And perhaps Putin is to thank for that indirectly. It's a weird, dark silver lining, but it's a silver lining nevertheless. Let me just give you a very broad tee off here. You talked about natural gas recently, oil, coal, nuclear. What do you think is the most overlooked story in energy in 2023 so far?
Piece we're working on right now is about the much-needed pushback against the sort of more radical elements of the climate alarmism movement. And the opening story for the piece we're working on is this disruption of the World Snooker Championship, actually. I'm not sure if you've seen this. Most people in the U.S. may not have.
Powder,
yeah. This is this, I call it a moronic death cult, Just Stop Oil. One of the things we've done that we've failed our youth, really, is we have allowed the sort of cancer of defeatism and alarmism around energy and climate change to metastasize amongst our youth. They've been peppered from preschool all the way through college, and with the scandalous assistance of the media to assume that the world is going to come to an end. And if we don't make radical change, which, by the way, none of them are interested in volunteering to be the first to do, somehow, like the world is, the planet is going to be destroyed. And it's high time that sound thinking people stand up to this nonsense. Most people just want to be left alone. They go about their daily lives, and they assume that the government will pull us back from the brink before they do something truly stupid. Germany proves that is actually not true. And the German Greens' obsession with eliminating nuclear power and their successful completion of that objective just last week is proof that the rest of the world, it's high time that we stand up to this nonsense, that we push back, and that we engage people in polite discourse. Civil disobedience, we believe, should and is off the table, which runs contrary to this Just Stop Oil movement that, as you say, spread powder all over the snooker table here at the Crucible in Sheffield. But we're going to arm our subscribers with the key talking points to have polite discourse in this regard, to begin to reshape people's minds. And it's many people who think like we do feel like it's a losing struggle. But our view is it's never wasted effort to say and do the right thing. And it's high time that the rest of us get into this debate, because the prospect of being thrown over the energy cliff is way more real and way more imminent than many of your listeners might believe.
And nuclear, if I'm not mistaken, all in, it actually reduces, results in fewer CO2 emissions than even solar or wind power. If you look at just, start to finish, besides being baseload, and people don't realize, like, renewables are, I'm not against them. They're great, but they're intermittent sources of power, and they're not on much of the time. And often where they generate the power most is pretty far from centers of population. So it's just not realistic to supply the world with renewables just yet, and maybe for a long, long time. And so we need something else. And if it's not nuclear, it's coal or gas.
Yeah. So, there's a great piece that we quote from in the sort of draft as we're putting this together. Why don't we run the following experiment? Let's take an isolated city and mandate that they can only use wind, solar, and batteries. And let's see how they do. Let's see what the costs are. Let's see what the reliability is. And let's see what it's like to live in the world that these radical environmentalist extremists are proposing that we should all exist in. And it's a piece written by the Manhattan Contrarian, which I would highly recommend to everybody. The piece was titled "The Disastrous Economics of Trying to Power an Electrical Grid with 100% Intermittent Renewables." So the title kind of gives away gives away the conclusion, but it's a really fascinating thought experiment. Like, why isn't there a jurisdiction anywhere in the world, even an experimental one, that has yet succeeded in getting the percentage of its electricity generated from intermittent renewables up past, say, 50% on an annualized basis? It can't be done. And that's the first big lie that we're going to confront in this piece that we're working on right now, which is that this is actually not only possible, but the only thing holding it back is some conspiracy of the big oil and fossil fuel companies. Like, nobody wants to live in a world where for 6 hours a day the electricity isn't on. And that's what you're going to look at if you go down this 100% renewable pathway. And so, to your question about nuclear power, there is no path to decarbonization that does not squarely involve a renaissance in nuclear power. Nuclear power is green, it is carbon-free, it is cheap, it is reliable, it is baseload, and for these reasons, it is hated by the sort of Malthusian element of the environmental movement, because actually their real objective, which they can't run on politically, is they would like far less people on the planet. And so our objective is to call them out on this hypocrisy. So your campaign is actually, we would rather have 2 billion people instead of 8. Okay, how do we select the 6 billion people to leave? And how would you go about choosing the manner in which they shall depart this great earth? And what is the benefit of eliminating 6 billion people? And so this whole concept of no trade-offs, that somehow we are burning fossil fuels out of choice, because we could easily be running our entire civilization on nothing more than solar, wind, and batteries, is one of the biggest and most dangerous lies that has ever been told. And yet, it is vehemently believed by a disturbingly large proportion of our population, because they have been force-fed this propaganda and groupthink from the early days of public education all the way through to the modern media. Just as we're sitting here, AFP, the French version of the Associated Press, is putting out a brand new course to educate journalists around combating misinformation around climate change. I could guarantee you that this course is complete and total BS. There's going to be no considerations of the trade-offs that are being forced upon us in this so-called course. And by the way, I thought journalists were supposed to report the news, who, what, when, where, why, as opposed to shape the news or police the news in this case, which is what AFP is demanding that journalists do. It's so absurd. It's so Orwellian. Many people don't want to confront it, and it's high time we did, which is the point of this piece, which is tentatively titled, it may change, Cult of Delusion.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you could argue, just being holistic, for many decades, we were blinded to the negative effects of pollution, of CO2, right? And now, maybe we've gone the other way, so we'll settle on some harmonic mean somewhere. And I would just argue for that little city experiment. It's not practical, but in a pure play sense, they would have to mine the minerals for their own batteries somewhere on their own property.
Well, let's excuse them of that obligation. No, literally, let's just allow them to build such a system, to pay for the outsourcing needed for all the mines and all that other stuff. Let's just see what a fully intermittent grid looks like for the people that live in such a community. And we'll have more on this in the piece, of course, but that won't ever happen because it's impossible to happen. And that it hasn't yet happened. That there isn't some green mecca that the Sierra Club and Greenpeace and Environmental Defense Fund have funded and set up as a proof of panacea, a proof of this sort of heavenly place where humans can flourish and nature is unharmed. That hasn't happened yet. Even a demonstration project is proof that they're actually playing sort of hide the ball with shells. And we'll go into this piece about all the sort of sleight of hands that are used, for example, like levelized cost of electricity and even just capacities. To state capacities without incorporating capacity factors is basically scientific fraud. You can say I have a gigawatt of solar and a gigawatt of nuclear, and the sleight of hand is they should be considered co-equal, when in reality, nuclear has a 90% capacity factor and solar has an 11% capacity factor in Germany.
Huge difference.
A huge difference. And this is a classic apples to oranges comparison where the intention of the people making such comparisons is that the audience will be deceived. It's high time that we call these things out.
I'm glad you're doing that. And we live in a system, not in a test tube. You got to look at the whole picture, and many people are failing to do that. So thank you for doing that. Let me shift gears totally, actually, to crypto, something that has also been in the news, and there's been a lot of I don't know if it's misinformation, but just confusion and drama, certainly. For scale, my numbers may be a little bit off, but last time I looked, all the crypto in the world had the market cap of like a third of Microsoft. Which is a good thing, I guess, if you're going to have all this drama and lack of regulation, that it could do a lot more damage than it's doing. And if you look at the crypto spikes in 2017 and more recently, a lot of those were wash trades, meaning it kind of didn't exist, or it didn't exist certainly on the level that people presume those bubbles and crashes existed on. It was a lot of just people trading back and forth, fake trades. Is there a there long term for crypto in your mind, number one? And how would you rate Gary Gensler, SEC chairman, on his crypto supervision, number two? Because he takes heat for crypto from the crypto community, but I tend to think he's a little more solid.
So I would separate crypto from Bitcoin.
Okay.
Bitcoin is regulated as an asset, and as we said in a piece called Golden Handcuffs, the overlap in the Venn diagram of the reasons why people would own crypto and the reasons why people would own gold is probably a little more comprehensive than gold bugs would like to admit. Both of them view their respective assets as being arm's length from the government and having a bit of moneyness about them and being a reasonable store of value. But crypto is an entirely different thing, of course. And we have, it's been fascinating for us, as a team. We have written about crypto from the lens of, hey guys, the Eye of Sauron, which is a phrase we've stolen from Ben Hunt at Epsilon Theory, i.e. the U.S. Treasury, wants to see every transaction in the world, and your existence stands in complete contradiction to that, and they're going to strike back. And so we have predicted, documented, even sometimes lamented the techniques and tactics that are being used by the U.S. government to crack down on the crypto community, and yet many even Bitcoin maxis, somehow view us as sort of cheering this on. When in fact we're just highlighting that this was coming and preparing our subscribers for it. And so in that context, it's very clear that Operation Choke Point 2.0 is real. Silvergate and Signature and to a lesser extent Silicon Valley Bank all had very deep ties to the crypto community. Silicon Valley Bank additionally had ties to the outrageous bubble in the private VC markets that had occurred from 2020 to 2022. And so not totally shocking that they were an early casualty of this bank run. But the U.S. government is going to kick crypto out of the U.S. dollar system, period. And anybody who doesn't like that or thinks that that's wrong, that's fine. But that doesn't change the sort of fundamental axiom for analysis, which is just look at the civil charges brought against Bittrex, which is an exchange, a crypto exchange last week. It's very clear that the SEC, which has been saying this for the better part of 2 years, virtually every other crypto outside of Bitcoin and perhaps Ether, although the SEC thinks it's a security and the CTFC disagrees, virtually every other cryptocurrency, including stablecoins, is viewed by the SEC as a security under the Howey test, and they will be cracking down hard on this market. And if you don't like Gary Gensler and you think ratioing him on Twitter is somehow going to affect your cause, we would argue that you're being naive. And so our objective as a team is to write what we believe the truth is. And in this regard, the truth is the U.S. government views crypto as an affront to the U.S. dollar hegemony, and the empire will strike back. And the empire is now in the process of rolling up and destroying everything that has even tangential relationship to crypto. And the denial on the part of those who are heavily invested in this space is a fascinating psychological experiment for us to observe. But that's not going to change the outcome. And we watched with some interest Gensler's testimony in front of Congress this week, and his prepared remarks we read as soon as they were published. And within the context of all the other moves that the SEC is doing, if we had anything to do with the crypto community, we would be making backup plans. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, do you think it's more because it's an affront to the dollar hegemony? I mean, that could be one theory, but consumer protection might be another angle. I think that the government would say, hey, look, we have all these people losing a lot of money. They're unsophisticated. And frankly, a lot of the exchanges or just the industry is populated by a lot of people who are relatively green and maybe have more confidence than competence. And so we need to step in and protect people. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that's an and situation, not an or, right? I mean, it's just undeniable that these crypto exchanges are simultaneously serving three roles, which historically have been legally mandated to be separate in the financial community, which is they act as an exchange, they act as a broker-dealer, and they act as a custodian and a clearinghouse. And those things have historically been separate, and to combine them is basically illegal in the eyes of the SEC. They have, in our view, very strong case law supporting them. Now, look, Congress could always act. Like Congress could pass a law today that changes that and carves out an exception for crypto. And Lord knows that the influencers in the crypto community have been lobbying heavily for that. But as Matt Levine at Bloomberg has correctly articulated, in our view, the wind in the sails behind such political movements was evaporated with the collapse of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. And so we take pride in doing our level best to predict what will happen, not what we want to happen. And oftentimes when we predict what will happen runs counter to what some of our readers would like to happen, they attack the analysis as opposed to sort of pondering it for its standalone qualifications. And so, but I think you'll see in the coming days and weeks ever more aggressive actions on the part of the SEC. We wrote a piece about the CTFC crackdown on Binance, which had to be very stunning to the crypto community because the Commodity Futures Trading Commission has always been viewed as a, quote, good regulator. And they sued Binance in a compelling document that kind of reads like a criminal charging document. If you sort of zoom out a little bit, that was a really damning indictment of CZ and Binance, and one wonders, what the future holds in store for anybody in the regulated fiat U.S. dollar system that is even tangentially exposed to the crypto space. The piece we wrote about the CTFC and Binance, it was called Price Discoveries, and we published it in early April.
I remember that one. Yep. And you could argue about that with FTX. Not only did they have those three functions, one exchange had those three functions combined, you also had a hedge fund sort of attached to that like a
And a
barnacle too.
bank, they were lending, yeah, and a
Why
venture
not,
capital
right?
fund, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so it's this is why we have regulations. You could, the counter argument is you're stifling innovation, but we believe that the counter argument is going to fall on deaf ears, and you should strategize and game plan around what the authorities are going to do, not what they should do or what you wish they would do.
Yeah. In my experience, crypto is as much a religion as anything else, and gold can have that aspect too. There's a lot of ideology, not just analysis. I'm guessing that you don't own much crypto personally, but I don't know if you talk about what you do own or what you're looking at. What do you see as attractive right now across the investment universe writ large?
So we have consistently said that we make money in fiat. We earn money by buying real assets like land and gold and collectibles, and we predominantly invest privately where we can affect the outcome by getting to know the management teams and leveraging our skills, expertise, and networks to affect the outcome. What's something we call sweat alpha. We by and large don't invest in the public markets, and that frees us up to write about stocks.
No conflict.
Right? No real conflict. The sort of the like if you're an investor, you have to always be pondering the sort of news flow, and back to the whole crypto conversation. Like, we're a no coiner. We've never owned a cryptocurrency. Every year when I personally fill out my taxes, the IRS asks me if I've owned a cryptocurrency, and I can say in full transparency, no, I haven't. And it's funny aside, I was on a relatively pro-Bitcoin podcast because the true Bitcoin maxis do appreciate our nuanced view and have us on their show. And I was on this show called What Bitcoin Did, and the host, Peter, whose last name escapes me, asked me, hey, is there a price where you would consider making an investment in Bitcoin? And I said, yeah, at some point, if it got down low enough, I could imagine allocating 1% or 2% of my, net worth into Bitcoin and then taking it to a cold storage and then giving it to my kids in 30 years, same way that I view the sort of solid gold that I own in my personal storage. Like, I would never view it as an investment or a speculation. And he kept pressing me for a number where I might consider doing that. And I just threw out a number. I said, probably 5,000. And literally not a day goes by where a dozen Bitcoin trolls are filling our Twitter feed with "still waiting for 5,000, bro," as though like somehow because we missed out on this.
You gave them a cause,
Well, somehow that we missed out on this run from 20,000 to 30,000, that we are, poor, or regretting it. Like, lots of things doubled and tripled in price that we don't participate in. It doesn't bother us. We don't care. Like, we manage our own portfolio, and we live in the fiat world, and we act accordingly.
That's funny. Yeah, they're vehement. Yeah, you just don't get it. I've heard that many times myself. Doomberg, you do get it overall writ large, and a fantastic guest. Always a pleasure to have you on. If somebody is watching this and says, I want more Doomberg, this is great stuff, I'm guessing you'd send them to doomberg.substack.com and perhaps at Doomberg on Twitter. If you're still on Twitter, where should they go?
Yeah, Doomberg.substack.com is our primary outlet. We publish 6 to 8 pieces a month. That is where our bread is buttered. That's where we make our livelihoods. Twitter is nice. We are still somewhat active on Twitter at DoombergT. And then most recently, Substack launched not a Twitter competitor, but something that might remind some people of Twitter. Of Twitter. It's called Notes, and we're trying to be more active on Notes to support our partners, Substack, in this business. So predominantly Doomberg.substack.com. And James, always really great to talk to you, and I appreciate the invite back, and looking forward to another rendition in a few months.
The pleasure is mine, as always. And thanks to you, Doomberg, and thanks to you guys for watching at home, as always, too.